Good afternoon, folks. I'm Luke Swetland with the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, and I am delighted to welcome you all to this, our second Lunch and Learn webinar of 2025, brought to you by the museum's Plan Giving Advisory Council. You know, for over 100 years, the museum has been providing educational opportunities, many at no cost, to our community, and that includes today's Lunch and Learn, which is going to look at some of the elements involved with settling an estate. You know, folks, supporting a good cause or an organization through an estate gift is a great way to ensure that your legacy will live on and that the organization you are supporting will be able to continue to do its good work. I do hope you will consider the museum in your estate plans so that we can ensure the future of this great institution. Now, before we get started, I just want to give you a little update on things that are happening at the museum and the Sea Center this summer. We just opened a new show in our Maximus Gallery called Drawn from Nature, and it commemorates the 30th anniversary of the John and Peggy Maximus Gallery. Your museum is one of the few in the world to have a gallery dedicated to showing antique nature art, a unique combination of history, science, nature, and art. Butterflies Alive will open May 24th in our Sprague Pavilion, and we'll have over 24 subtropical species visiting us this summer to delight you. In July, we'll be opening our new Space Sciences exhibit, and you'll be able to explore the solar system from the vantage point of our cosmic coast. Down at the Sea Center, our incredible wet deck is there to delight you. Our planetarium shows at the museum are very popular. There's a lot to experience here, folks. So do check out our website, sbnature.org, and learn more about all the great things to see and do this summer at the museum and the Sea Center. But now let's get started with today's program. And for that, I will hand things over to my colleague, Andrea McFarling. Andrea?
Hi, thanks, Luke. Hi, I'm Andrea McFarling, the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History's Philanthropy Officer of Legacy Giving. We're happy to share with you this free webinar with helpful information on how you can settle the estate of a loved one. Today's webinar is presented by our good friend Ben Pringle. Time has been allocated at the end to answer questions, so please feel free to put those questions in the chat, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. If you have any technical issues today, Robert Shutt is available to help, and his email will appear in the chat momentarily. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any plan giving questions or need more information. I'm here to help you leave your legacy, and hopefully you will keep the museum in mind in your planning. Now I would like to introduce our speaker, Ben Pringle. Ben Pringle is a senior relationship advisor at the Northern Trust Company in Montecito, focusing on trust administration and empowering Santa Barbara families to achieve their financial goals over their lifetimes and preserve their legacy. Ben studied music history at Florida State University and the University of California, Santa Barbara, and later earned credentials as a certified trust and fiduciary advisor and certified financial planner. He uses both his musical and financial training to effectively distill, communicate, and implement his clients' most cherished goals and aspirations. When not helping families, he is active in the Santa Barbara music community as a board member for Community Arts Music Association, a bass singer in choir of voices, and a regular speaker for pre-concert presentations previewing classical concerts in town. Ben is also a member of the museum's Plan Giving Advisory Council. Ben, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I now turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Today, we're going to tackle a sensitive topic. At some point in our lives, we may find ourselves in the position of being asked to settle someone's affairs. Not only are we typically not ever trained on how to do such a thing, It also comes at a time when we are feeling grief and complex emotions, and the combination of those two bring on even more emotions and feelings of being overwhelmed. Maybe anxiety to make sure that you're doing this correctly, all at a time when emotions are quite a bit heightened. Um, so one of the things that we want to do today is to give you some tools and some things to think about if you do find yourself in this situation. Um, for me personally, my dad died earlier this year, and my mom, who knew their finances, pretty darn well, still had a hard time staying motivated to get even some of the simplest tasks done. And though I was also feeling grief, I knew I needed to help my mom. And it turned out that I did this type of thing for work and really could use the tools that I use organizationally at work to help my mom and to help my family. It also made me realize that some of the aspects of my work I really take for granted because I know them so well and others don't, and there's aspects of this that maybe you never think about otherwise. And so when talking to Andrea about this recently, we thought, hey, this would be a great topic to bring to members, to bring to all of you, to help give you some background, some additional tools to understand. Um, so today I want to give you a primer on this type of process that can help you navigate this type of event using these organizational tools. So we'll walk through the process with a few tips here and there. And then I'll also give you a few specifics that are common financial topics that are important to know, and some of them you may already know, and some you might not. And ultimately, I think for the audience here, um, this might also be a way to help you understand your own finances and to think about how you might organize or might set up certain aspects of your finances to help those that may need to do this for you when that time comes. So what we're going to do today is not comprehensive. Settling anyone's affairs is situational and specific to their the fact pattern, their assets, how they want those to distribute. Um, so we'll really go. This is really a framework to navigate through that. And some of the materials that I've provided Andrea that she will share with you have some more specifics as well. Um, and so let's jump in. So the first thing to remember in this situation is that while there are many decisions that need to be made, few of these decisions need to occur immediately. It's so important to give yourself grace and know that there is a process ahead that is going to take time, and for everybody, it's different. In my business, I see some people that start this process that want to get everything done right away. They're really go-getters. They know this is hard, but they want to just make it happen as quickly as possible. Others are really find it to be something that could take a long time, that they're not really ready to step into these things. All of those are okay because no decision needs to be made right away. One of the first questions that's important for you to ask, though, is that whether you are named to act in a legal capacity, in a fiduciary capacity, under that person's will or their trust. So being named as the personal representative, being named as executor or trustee, because that's an important aspect of everything we'll talk about today and this process, because there are those who have legal authority to take these steps through the process, and there are those who are involved but may not have the legal authority. So let's say you're thinking about let's say if your dad passes away, um, your dad names you as the executor or the trustee, then you have legal capacity and you have legal authority to do this. You may find that someone else or some other entity might be named in that legal capacity. So an accountant or potentially your attorney or maybe a bank. In that case, all of these steps, you can certainly be helpful to that person, and to help them, find information, to help them understand the overall picture. But that person who's named has the legal authority to do that. Just as an aside, lots of times near the end of someone's life, someone in the family may be acting under their power of attorney document, and they're named as the attorney in fact. So dad names the oldest son to be their power of attorney. During their lifetime, that person who's named under that power of attorney document can do many of the things that the individual could do on their own. But after they pass, that power of attorney document is no longer effective. So it's something that it's good to keep in mind. So once you know what your role is, then you can really look to assemble your team. You are not in this alone, and so whether that may be family members or friends to help you with the process, you may also want to look to the team of advisors that the decedent used. So, for instance, having the estate planning attorney, potentially who wrote that will or trust, is important to contact, and also having the accountant. So if your dad's like my dad, he did his own taxes, right? And so maybe there wasn't an accountant that he used during his lifetime, but after someone passes, taxes get a little more complex. And so typically you really should be working with an accountant who can help you with those tax filings. So but if that person did have an accountant, we'd certainly want to contact them. They're going to be able to help in a lot of ways because, as you know, most assets have some tax liability tied to them. So if there's a question about whether or not there's an asset out there, often the accountant knows about it. So then also having your wealth management professionals as part of your team, whether that's a banker or someone who works with their investments, they're going to be able to help you with certain of these steps, and that will be very helpful to you. And then just consider anyone else who might be important to those financial affairs. For instance, if there's rental real estate, perhaps there's a property manager or someone else that may be important to keep close as part of your team, so that you're not working on this alone. You may have the legal responsibility and the authority to be the decision maker, but having this team can really help you with navigating this process. So one of the things is certainly ordering death certificates, because many of the tasks that we'll talk about require having a certified uh, death certificate, an original. And so of course the funeral home will ask you and do that for you, and you certainly want to make sure that they give you that you give them the data and make sure that the information is correct on that death certificate. But they'll also often ask you how many, and we often advise to have at least a dozen. You think that's a lot, but when any of these third parties, when any of these service providers need an original, they may or may not give that back to you afterwards. So you want to make sure that you have enough. Um, uh, in our experience, we have certainly been able to, if we're mailing this to an organization or taking it to a place physically, we can always ask to have the original back, and sometimes they will return that. It's good to have them on file because down the road you may find that you need one, and it's much easier to have them on, kind of on hand rather than having to go back and order more. But ultimately, remember, start small. Um, these decisions don't have to be made immediately. The more immediate focus is understanding the basic financial picture, and maybe you already understand that, and that's good to know that when you do. Um, it's interesting that sometimes there may be things that you didn't know about, or things that you had not really thought about for a while, and it may slip your mind in a time like this. So understanding that basic financial picture is really important. A great way to start doing that is looking through checking account statements or transactions, credit card statements, to determine how and when and from which accounts expenses are being paid. Because if you do need to keep keep the utilities on in a house, you certainly want to make sure they're being paid. Maybe some of them are set up on automatic payment. Um, this gives you a great start for understanding all the ins and outs, and especially the ins, because there may be other things that are coming into the bank account, like Social Security, or if the person had a pension, or other automatic payments that were coming to them. That'll give you a lot of clues as to what's out there. And then ultimately, you want to notify these service providers and let them know. Even if you haven't gotten death certificates, you can of course let service providers know, and then they'll let you know what exactly they need. Some places, like a cell phone provider, may just want a copy of the death certificate. And if they just want a copy, I wouldn't send them an original, because you only got 12. So if they say, hey, we just need a copy, just send them a copy. For those that will need originals, go ahead and send them originals, but maybe even ask them if they'll return them. So starting small, one of the things that I think is probably the best kept secret around this is really establishing an organizational system that works for you. What we did with my mom was to really set everything aside in separate folders. So she had a box of manila envelopes, and I said, great, that's a perfect way for us to do this. Let's put all the legal documents in one, mark it as legal documents, put all the bills in another, your investment statements in another one. And the nice thing about folders, the way I do it anyway, is that you can really write on the outside of those folders the tasks that you think you need to do, or that you need to do, and then you can mark the date that you did them. Or one of the greatest things about a task list is marking it off. So when you actually cross it off, it feels you feel accomplishment, and it's certainly helpful. um, as there's certain things that really are just kept electronically, or you go online to get those. um, you might consider printing out one copy of those, just so that you have them in those folders, so it reminds you. I think in this day and age of everything being digital, having physical versions of things helps us remember, helps us be tactile. um, and so for these envelopes, writing dates of payments, anything that you've contacted them, or when you might need to contact them next, can all be really written on there. If you're more of a spreadsheet type of person, certainly you can track all of this on a spreadsheet. Though I like having the folders as well. But as you're building this understanding of the financial picture, creating a balance sheet listing all of the assets and all of the debts, we call them liabilities, is really important. So knowing about credit cards, statements, knowing about mortgages, really creating that balance sheet is going to be helpful to your team members too, your accountant and your estate planning attorney. So in collecting that information, places to look: safe deposit boxes, typically an office desk, or a specific folder on their computer, other locations you think where important documents might be kept, and then really those bank statements for transactions, to look for other things that might be out there. Also, over time, reviewing the mail is really important. Sometimes things come in the mail only once a year, or maybe only quarterly. So keeping an eye on that. And so depending on the situation, you if you are named as the executor and you have legal authority to do so, you can change the mailing address for these for bills and things to make sure that they're coming to where you can get to them. But certainly reviewing those, the mail is going to be important. Now, what's happened most recently is that a lot of providers like to use online portals. So that makes it harder to track things through the mail. So really thinking about, if you have access to their computer, checking bookmarks, browser history to see what other potential vendors they might be using, that can really help. So the common documents to locate, this is not comprehensive, although it's pretty long as it is, but certainly, understanding, do you have an original last will and testament, any codicils? Codicils are amendments to it, and then a revocable trust if they have one, and any amendments to that. And then copies of other types of trusts. They may have set up trusts for their kids already, sometimes happens, or maybe they're a beneficiary of a trust. Having those will be important. And then looking for IRA, 401k, any retirement type of accounts. And while this might not be on the statements, we want to find out about the beneficiary designations on those. And we'll talk about that more in a second. The same thing with life insurance policies or annuities. It's important to know that they're there, and to also to notify them, but also to understand who the beneficiaries are of those. And we'll talk about why that's important in a second. Checking savings accounts, CD statements, brokerage statements, credit cards, motor vehicle titles, and then any other insurances that are out there. Finding these will be important to notify and to wind those up if needed, or continue. Then property deeds, copies of all mortgages, loan documents, promissory notes. And then less common, but still important, if there are any partnerships, LLCs or S corps, private equity, anything else that's out there, is important to note. Some of these may be things that your wealth management professionals might be, holding for them. So you can ask your team, and certainly the accountant who worked with the decedent might know about these as well. And then if there's still some stock certificates or bond certificates, those are less common these days, but you find them once in a while. Okay, so those are really those first steps of the estate settlement process, but there's more to it from there. And you say, gosh, Ben, this is already a lot. Well, this can be a longer process, depending on the situation. But I wanted to make sure you had a sense of what the overall process is. So we found all the assets and liabilities. We've started to look at the titling of the asset and those beneficiary designations. We'll talk about titling in a second. And then making sure, and in the estate settlement process, that you're properly collecting all of those, as dictated by the account titling, and what to do with them comes in later, but making sure that you have that the person who has legal authority has control over all of those assets so they can protect them, and then distribute them as needed. Making sure all the assets are valued. Valuations are somewhat easier for bank accounts, investment accounts, but there may be other assets, like a house. What is the value of the house on the date of death? So your team can help you find the right people to help you with that. And then making sure that the assets are properly managed during this process. And any debts or potential claims are investigated and satisfied. So that credit card debt that's out there, before really you can make distributions at the end, you want to make sure any of the debts are taken care of. And then a big one is that tax reporting that's got to be done. And again, after someone passes, they can't incur tax liability anymore. because they're not alive. So those assets may need to have a new tax identification number. There's additional tax reporting there, and that's where the accountant that you're using for their estate will be important. And then ultimately, assets are distributed according to the decedent's directions. Now, so we think about this and we say, okay, the decedent's directions, that must come from the will, right? The will or the trust. Um, that is true for certain assets, but account titling is very important. So that's the next section that I want to talk about, because understanding the account titling and whether or not that account specifically is going to pass by the directions in the will or in the trust or otherwise. So let's take a little time to look at account titling. Now there won't be a quiz on this at the end. Some of them you may recognize and you go, oh yeah, but I know what that is. We don't expect you to know, to remember all of these, but knowing that this is an important aspect of this just raises the flag for you to make sure that you do check with the accountant, with the estate planning attorney on these account titlings. So let's go over some of these. Joint accounts. Sometimes this is called joint tenants with rights of survivorship, and it means there's two tenants, two people who own that account, and these type of accounts passes to the surviving joint tenant upon their death, upon the death of the other joint tenant by operation of law. So let's think about dad. So dad says, dad passes away. His will says, give all of my assets to my 3 kids. Now, before dad passed away, he needed a little bit of help, on a bank account. And so he added the oldest son to a bank account to where they both are their joint tenants with rights of survivorship. What happens to that account? Well, it doesn't pass as the will says to go to the 3 kids. It's going to go to the other tenant of that account. And there's lots of good reasons to do something like that, and it happens a lot. And so, but it's just something to be aware of, both in your own planning and in settling an estate. So this is not subject to the terms of the will or the trust, because there is a joint tenant who is the one that receives this account. So when you have these, just providing a death certificate to the institution uh, will take care of that, and they'll review that, and take the steps necessary. Eventually, these type of assets need to be retitled, but again, the bank institution or investment firm can help with that, to make sure that those are changed over. There's another version of joint ownership, which is called tenants in common, and it's not as common as the title says. So you may not see these very much, but let's say dad and his brother had some type of investment together, and so they had that in tenants in common, where it's not the same as a joint tenants, but instead each tenant receives their assets from that, their respective share. So dad dies and brother has a 50% tenants in common. He keeps his 50%, and then the deceased tenant in common, that passes pursuant to their estate plan. So in the case of dad, who in his will says, give this to my 3 kids, his 50% would then actually, it does pass by the will by going through the probate process. So with the decedent's interest, would be a probate asset. We'll talk about probate in a second. So then other types of assets are your trust assets, and this one can be easy enough. All assets titled in the name of a trust are trust assets. So in this situation, perhaps you've set up a trust and it's your revocable trust. And so as long as the title of that account, or the title that's on your deed for your property, is in the name of the trust, then it is a trust asset. Typically, when you during your life set up a revocable trust, you probably use your own social security number for tax ID. But again, remember, after you pass, you can no longer incur tax liability. So there needs to be a new tax ID number set up for this, and this is where the accountant, where the estate planning attorney can help that with you. But so this becomes a separate tax identification number, and there may be, depending on the situation, if there's a surviving spouse, maybe the assets are split to where one is in a trust that would have a new tax identification number, and some may be for the surviving spouse. But ultimately, these assets distribute pursuant to the terms of that trust agreement. So not like joint tenants for rights of survivorship, but by what the trust says. So then probate assets. So any asset that's held in an individual's sole name without any beneficiary designations, there's not another name on the account, are considered probate assets. And so what is probate? Well, the probate court is a process through the court that actually validates a will. So when someone passes and someone else is trying to settle their estate, they have to find the will, and the will needs to be validated through the court process to say, yes, this is the final will. So that court process is important to not only validate the will, but then name the person who has the legal authority to distribute those assets, to collect those assets, manage them, uh, and distribute them. This is why in California, if you go to see an estate planning attorney, they'll say, hey, you ought to set up a trust because you don't have to go through the probate process if all of your assets are in trust. What often happens is that there may be, say, one account. Let's say you've set up all of your assets to be in a trust, but you have a bank account that's just in your individual name. That could potentially be a probate. Well, it is a probate asset, but it potentially would have to go through the courts unless it's within the de minimis probate threshold, and that threshold these days is about $200,000. So if you have a bank account that's in your name, or if there's a bank account in the decedent's name that has $10,000 in it, you would likely be able to go to that institution uh, and and fill out a small estate affidavit, is the term, saying, "Hey, this is the only asset that is in that would be, within this person's probate, and that account can be given over to you for that." And so that's a process that you have to go to that institution, talk through that with them, see what other information you might need to give them. But otherwise, assets have to go through the probate court process, which is essentially a formalized version of what we showed you before as the estate settlement process. It's just essentially court reviewed. So that personal representative or executor is named during is validated through the court process, and they would be the ones that are to collect those assets and put it into account in the name of the estate, and then follow the court process to distribute that. So if your head's not swimming enough, there's one more type of account that is important, and those are accounts with beneficiary designations. You probably all have one of these, I would imagine. The examples can be IRAs, 401ks, retirement accounts from work, 403bs. There are a few others called payable on death or transfer on death accounts. These can be bank accounts that say, dad, this is dad's account, and no one else has any ownership of it while I'm alive. But when dad passes, then it's payable to someone else after their death. And also life insurance are beneficiary designations. So these type of accounts, whatever the will says, that is not effective for these type of accounts. So they don't pass by operation of law like joint tenants do, nor by the will or trust, but basically via the contract of those accounts. So when you're looking for these type of accounts and you find them, you do need to ask and find out who the beneficiaries are. Now, if you are actually not the legal authority over this person's estate, the bank or the institution may not tell you who the beneficiaries are, especially if you're not the beneficiary, because that's part of their procedure. But you do have to let them know that this person has passed, and then they work to contact those beneficiaries. So with that, I think there's a few other ones that we would want to talk about. Uh, a, a, a few specific type of accounts and what some of the options might be, uh, especially in the situation of being a surviving spouse. So let's first talk about these IRAs while we're on beneficiary designations. So in an IRA, and for that matter, more or less a 401k is very similar. Um, if your spouse designates you as the beneficiary, so your spouse dies and has designated you as the spouse to be the beneficiary, you have options on what to do with that IRA. And there's two things, and it really depends on a whole host of variables, mostly around age, whether or not the decedent was taking their required minimum distribution yet, and your team can help you think through these options. But one option is to be able to transfer that account, transfer those assets into your own IRA, and this is called a spousal rollover IRA. And what that means is you as the spouse have taken those deceased spouse IRA assets as your own, meaning that you are able to follow the rules of your own IRA, and especially around required minimum distributions. And so it just essentially becomes more money in your own IRA around those rules. There could be reasons for you to transfer the IRA into a separate inherited IRA for your benefit. And a lot of times this is done when there is an age difference, and maybe one spouse is already taking required minimum distributions and the other is not. So there may be reasons to do this, and this would be something to talk through with the accountant or other wealth management professionals. And so with these, under the current rules, you can distribute these accounts out over your lifetime, right? So you can take distributions based on your life expectancy, or the decedent's life expectancy, but over your lifetime. The biggest rule change with IRAs in the past few years was around non-spousal inherited IRAs. So if someone passes away, let's say dad has passed away, and his three children receive portions of his IRA, these will need to be set up as inherited IRAs for their benefit. And what that means is, first of all, is that it is separate from your own, from each of those children's own IRA, that have their own rules around when to distribute. Because with a few exceptions, most inherited IRA beneficiaries must now take out the full balance of that inherited IRA by the 10th anniversary of the owner's death, meaning that those assets have to be distributed, and they can be distributed to another account, like a taxable account. It's just, well, what do you have to do? You have to pay the tax. The government says, hey, in 10 years, I want you to pay the deferred tax on this. And so that's separate from an IRA that, if one of the children are in 60 years old, they don't have to take anything out of their current IRA, the one that they own. But this inherited one is different. So these are little aspects that I think are important to be aware of. While we're on this, benefits from an employer, remember, any pensions that are out there, do they cease at death, or do they continue for a beneficiary or multiple beneficiaries? And how much? So if if there is a survivor benefit, and a lot of times when you set up a pension, you can decide whether you want no survivor benefit or 100% survivor benefit or some smaller percentage. And so finding out what that is will be helpful to understand how these assets pass. And so contacting, a former employer, or if the person who passed was working at that time, you do want to see what other additional benefits might be out there. So there might be a 401k out there somewhere that may not have been moved into their IRA, or there might be life insurance, especially if someone was still working. So to check with a past employer would be important. And then the one that I think is interesting, and a place where some people are not aware of this, is Social Security. So Social Security in California, funeral homes are legally required to notify the Social Security Administration when someone dies. But if you are a surviving spouse of someone who's passed, that survivor benefit must be applied for. So while the funeral home will contact them, you as a surviving spouse have to essentially call and set up an appointment with SSA and apply for that. So as a spouse, the survivor benefit is either 50% of your spouse's benefit or 100% of yours, but not both. And it's just a higher amount. So essentially, with whichever of those are higher would be what you receive going forward. When you call them, you will set up a meeting to go in to see them, and that's the way the rules are today. And so if you're a current spouse, then bringing the death certificate and a marriage certificate, will be important. As you may know, you may also be able to claim a spousal benefit from someone that you are divorced from, and there are certain rules around that. But having the marriage certificate, the death certificate, and of course the divorce decree. So these are some of the details. For some, anyone who is a veteran or what was a veteran, there may be life insurance policies out there for that person through the VA. And the tip there is that really there's an annual letter that goes out to veterans, indicating those death benefit values. So that may be something that you see, see eventually in the mail. But if you're wondering about it and you know that the person was a veteran, you can certainly call the number, and you can find this on their website as well. So this was a whole host of details that I hope triggered some thoughts for you, about your own situation, or if this is something that perhaps you may be preparing for to think through this. Organization can really be the key. So with a little organization and taking it step by step, getting help from your team, you can tackle this. One of the documents that I've provided for everyone is something we have called the Well Prepared Family, which is a guidebook and it's kind of a workbook too, to really write down a lot of the information that might be out there for someone who might need to do this for you. So as you're thinking about this, think about your own situation and how you may be able to help those who you asked to do this, at some point in the future. And so hopefully this has been helpful. And Andrea, I think we could take some. Andrea, I think we could take some questions.
Thank you so much, Ben. We so appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. Fantastic. So I do have a number of questions for you. It sounds like from what you started, we definitely need to get your loved one's death certificate? What if you can't get it?
Well, and if you are named as the legal to have the legal authority, you should be able to get the death certificate. But in these situations where you may not be the legal authority, that can be challenging. So I think finding who might be out there to have that legal authority, or uh, contacting an estate planning attorney to work on getting that for that.
What if there's an error on the death certificate? What do you do there?
Oh, these do happen from time to time, unfortunately, and gosh darn it, if the Social Security number is wrong on that death certificate, and you take that to a bank, they'll say, hey, this doesn't match our records, and that becomes a headache. Um, Typically you can go back to the funeral home that did it to ask them to make an amendment to that. The best you can do when you get that death certificate is to really look over it and ensure everything's right before you get down that road too far.
Yeah. And what if you think that the will or the trust is located in the safe deposit box? How do you actually get into the safe deposit box?
Oh, that's a great question. The safe deposit box, it can be titled in the name of the trust. So if you knew that you were the trustee and you had a copy of the trust, you could certainly show that. But essentially, each bank has their own procedures around this, and typically, let's say you think that the only copy of those documents are in that safe deposit box. Go to the bank with a certified death certificate, and work with them to see the best way to get in there. It's really important to have multiple copies of these type of documents, your will and your trust. Um, Having the originals are important. Sometimes your estate planning attorney can hold on to those originals too. So it is a bit of a process, and everybody's slightly different on how that's worked through.
Thank you. So do I have to contact my loved one's attorney to handle the accounts in their trust? And do I have to pay the attorney?
Well, yeah, well, certainly for the work they do, you certainly have to pay them. And look, when you are named as the legal authority, you have a legal duty and a fiduciary duty to follow the steps to for those beneficiaries. So it's really highly advisable to definitely have legal counsel involved to help. And if they are the attorney that wrote the document, they probably also knew the person, so they can be a great resource for you. Um, Sometimes folks can be worried about, well, I can't actually get to any of the money yet because I'm not, I haven't gotten the legal authority yet, but I will. Um, um, Folks can essentially pay for certain things beforehand, and keep records, keep receipts of those things, because those become expenses of the administration, and can be reimbursed to you.
And then what about closing a loved one's credit card? And if there's a balance, who pays the balance on the credit card? And is it legally required to pay the balance?
Yeah, sure. Well, so again, with a credit card company, it's important to notify them, and whether they need a certified original copy of the death certificate, or a copy, that should get that process started. Certainly, if they then know that someone has passed away, they're going to say, hey, um, there's a balance here and that needs to be paid. They are well aware that there is a process in getting those assets. So that is something that should be able to be paid from the estate assets. It may not be necessary for you to write a check right away to get them off your back. because you are in the middle of an estate settlement process. But technically, if there are assets in the estate, then those are debts that need to be satisfied before you make distributions.
Regarding digital records, will probate courts now finally accept digital records when settling the estate?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, and this is something that will change from time to time and will evolve. I'm not aware currently that digital copies of things are accepted, and that's something that you'd want to check with the estate planning attorneys. We all need to get there. I think as with fraud, it's certainly much easier to doctor a digital copy. So especially around a will, that's why you want the original will, that you can show that this is signed by this person. So those are important safeguards.
If IRA beneficiary is the trust, how is the IRA rollover treated?
Well, the IRA itself becomes an asset of that trust, and your trust document that should actually should have language to explain how those required minimum distributions are to come out of the trust. But essentially, the IRA is not. Depending on a few things, I think in general, the IRA would be an inherited IRA for the benefit of whatever the trust is, and those required minimum distributions typically will flow through the trust and out to the beneficiary, but it depends on how the trust is specifically set up. Some trusts may say have those required minimum distributions stay in the trust, and maybe there's discretionary provisions around how that's distributed, but there's a lot of tax reasons to do that or not do that. So if you have that situation, your estate planning attorney is great for that.
Yes, I was gonna suggest that's the person to talk to.
Yeah.
Let's see, and here's a question about Social Security survivor benefits. It says, how long do you need to have been married to qualify for Social Security survivor's benefit? I did a webinar once on Social Security, and I'm not sure the exact time frame. I don't know if you know that off the top of your head.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think it's relatively easy to look up, but there are a number of great pieces of information on Social Security and what if you get your benefit versus your spouse's benefit or your prior spouse's benefit.
Correct.
Another question, did I understand correctly, a surviving spouse would only receive 50% of the deceased spouse's benefits? I think that's another one of those nuances within Social Security that you need to dive deeper in.
Yeah, and so whichever amount is higher. So it depends on how much your Social Security benefit was and or is, and how much theirs is as well.
Any thoughts on pre-planning, paying, how to get this all prepared for your loved ones that are going to take on this?
Well, many things. I mean, I think, and if you mean specifically around funeral arrangements, we have a lot of clients, and I know a lot of families who do the prepayment for those type of things to make some of those things easier at the time. Really, anything that you can do to facilitate those first few months can be very helpful to whoever is settling the estate, and it's something to talk to your professionals about. But we see some clients who want to have just a small bank account that has somebody else who is on that account that would automatically have access to those funds, and maybe it's only a small, de minimis amount, is another way to do that. But anything that can be prepaid certainly helps the process, going forward.
How do I change the title of my loved one's car to me? And if there's a balance due, car loan, am I required to pay that?
Gosh, I haven't thought about a car loan in a while in this manner. So there's two pieces of that. One, if outside of debt. So let's start with a car that's paid off. A car that's paid off, you can actually fill out a form with the DMV, to change that, that titling. And so going to the DMV website will help you with those steps. And then I'd have to get back to you on the debt, because I haven't thought about the debt in a while.
I would think it's similar to credit cards where,
Yeah.
the car has to go back, or you have to distribute, before you distribute any assets from the state, you would need to pay off any debt.
Yeah, and sometimes, sometimes a trust document or a will may even say, whether or not, if someone is to get a house, that they may say that, they want that beneficiary to get the house free of debt. So the debt is paid from, from the assets of the trust, so that beneficiary can get that house, without the debt. Otherwise, basically, you're taking on the ownership of the house and the debt.
And what's the typical timeline before you can actually get a death certificate from the funeral home? How long does that take?
It varies, and I'm trying to think about the last time that I've done one, because it's usually a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's usually a couple of weeks, and that's one of the reasons why it's important to spend the time to get your ducks in a row. Before you have those death certificates, there are steps that you can take, but waiting for that death certificate can be a few weeks.
Yep, and I know you have provided me some great materials like this well-prepared family guidebook and some other things that I will be sharing with all the people who registered today. So thank you again so much, Ben. We really appreciate your time and expertise. As you can see on the screen, here are our contact information if you have any additional questions or would like to talk to us about your specific needs. And I think all of us are thinking a lot more about everything that goes into settling someone's affairs, including our own. I hope as all of you are working on your own estate plans that you might consider including the museum in your planning. Please know that I'm here and available with any legacy giving questions you may have on how to do that. The museum's Plan Giving Advisory Council is hosting another free lunch and learn on September 9th. And we will send information out about that. We also have our free estate planning essentials workshop. That's going to be on Sunday, November 16th from 2 to 4, followed by a reception with estate planning professionals from 4 to 5. And as we've just discussed, a estate plan is essential to ensuring that your wishes are honored, your family's protected, and your assets are managed according to your wishes. So as you heard today, there's many details that go into this, and we haven't even talked about what happens to grandma's pie plate, right? There's all the personal items of someone's, and we just touched a little bit on all the legal side of things. So thank you again. I encourage everyone to attend the workshop that's coming up in November, whether you're creating your first estate plan or you're updating yours. There's a lot of great information that we have available at that workshop. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you to the museum's Plan Giving Advisory Council for helping to coordinate the presentation. And thank you to all the people who attended. We greatly appreciate your involvement with the museum. Have a great day, and thanks again, Ben.
Thank you.
Take care.